Welcome to Class 4 of the DTF Success Series. This class was originally taught live, but due to a technical difficulty during the live stream, the beginning of the class wasn't captured. I am re-recording that portion again so that you have the complete class available here on YouTube. So as we go through the class, you'll hear me interacting with those who joined me live, and we had a giveaway at the end. But whether you're joining me live or watching later, I still want you to grab your paper, pen, pencil, or crayon and take some notes because we're going to cover a lot of information. Now, if you've been with me since class 1, we have covered a plethora of stuff. We talked about choosing your DTF path, what you actually need to get started. And in our last class, we walked through what you need to know when ordering your first transfers. And now those transfers have arrived, or hopefully yours are on the way. So it's time to talk about what happens when you're ready to press that first shirt. So I want you to know today isn't about memorizing one magic temperature or watching me press a shirt from beginning to end. My goal is for you to understand what affects a successful press and what you should pay attention to before you start. Some common mistakes that can happen and what you should check when something doesn't look right. So what you'll learn by the end of this class is what affects a successful press, what to check before starting, how to spot common mistakes, and how to troubleshoot. I don't want you leaving here with a number memorized. I want you leaving here understanding what to look for. That's our class 4 promise. So, if this is your first time joining me, welcome. I'm Kenyatta, owner of Purposely Crafted. Now, I didn't start out knowing everything about custom crafting or DTF. I had no idea. My journey into custom crafts came through learning, trying things, making some mistakes, buying some things, I probably didn't need, and figuring out what actually made sense for me and my business. And that's one of the reasons I created the DTF Success Series. I wanted to help beginners understand what they're getting into before they spend a lot of money trying to figure out everything on their own. I started crafting in 2019 after I lost my job unexpectedly, and I wanted to give my children some custom items. And after purchasing a Cricut and trying to do a couple water bottles that were not so great. The children loved them. They thought they were wonderful, but I knew they weren't right. I didn't know what I was doing with the Cricut. So I asked for some help, and then I was told that I could figure it out. So I was on a quest to figure it out. And had not been for them telling me to figure it out when I asked for help, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. So before we jump into today's lesson, I want to check in with those of you who were here for class 3. Your challenge was to choose a vendor, choose a design, decide on your size, and actually order a test transfer. Did anyone do that? If you did, let me know in the chat. And I'd love to hear how the ordering experience went for you. Was it easier than you expected? Did you run into anything you weren't sure about? And if your transfer has already arrived, I'd love to see it. Send me a picture along with a few sentences about your ordering experience. Now, I know you're excited. You got your transfer, you got your shirt, and you're ready to turn that heat press on and make something. But stop. Before you turn on anything, there are a few things I want you to check. Don't wait until you've pressed your transfer on the shirt to notice that something wasn't right with the transfer. So you need to check that transfer. You need to check for the correct design, correct size, correct colors, no obvious damage, and nothing missing or distorted. And then when you do that, you know, you're going to move on to checking your blank because later I'm going to show you a transfer that I received that taught me a very important lesson about testing your transfers before you ever use them on a customer shirt. I actually pressed this one on a test shirt and I'm glad that I did because just imagine you pressing the perfect transfer and then realizing there was a stain on the shirt. So that's why it's important to check the blank. Make sure there's no stains, no holes, no marks. It's the correct size and color, where the seams or pockets, if they're raised areas, in anything that's unusual. And then you want to read the vendor instructions because they have specific temperature, pressing time, pressure, peel instructions, and second press. Don't assume that because your last transfer pressed at one setting that this transfer will press the exact same way. Now, I want you to be prepared before you start pressing. You don't want to be scrambling and then realize that something that you need is across the room, because the goal is to prepare first so that you're not scrambling once your press is hot. So you want to go ahead, take a look at the garment itself. Is it cotton, polyester, a blend? We talked about those in class number 3. Does it have seams or anything else that could affect the pressing area? You don't need to become a fabric expert today. I just want you to start building the habit of knowing what you're working with before you press it. Because that extra minute before you turn on your press can save your shirt, save you a shirt, a transfer, and some money, and a whole lot of frustration. So just take that little extra minute. So now we're going to talk about the big 3: time, temperature, and pressure. We've already talked about the transfer. We checked our blank. We've read our instructions, but this can make or break your press. These 3 things go hand in hand. If one is off, your finished shirt may not turn out the way you expected. Because you may hear someone say, I press all my DTFs at this temperature for this many seconds. And that may work for their transfers, their press, and their blanks, but that doesn't automatically make it the right setting for yours. Now, temperature is simply how hot your heat press gets. Your transfer needs enough heat for the adhesive to bond with the fabric, but more heat doesn't mean a better press. If the instructions say 10 seconds, that doesn't mean 20 seconds must be twice as good. 10 seconds means 10 seconds. Now we're going to talk about pressure. Now, pressure is how firmly your heat press pushes the transfer against the garment. And this is where beginners sometimes struggle, because most machines do not give you a nice little number that says, hey, congratulations, this is medium pressure. It is a trial and error. But once you get it and you know your press, you'll know the pressure that works the best. So there's not one magic DTF setting. So don't think that all of these things are separate. They all work together. If something goes wrong, don't automatically assume that it's the temperature. It could be time, it could be pressure, and it could be something else, which is why we're going to talk about that later when we troubleshoot. Okay, now let's see who's with me. What are the 3 things I just told you can make or break your press? The answer is temperature, time, and pressure. Now, if you wrote that down on your paper with your pen, pencil, or crayon, you already had the answer. Now, your heat press itself matters too. 2 presses set to the same temperature may not always perform exactly the same. That's another reason why I don't want you to blindly copy somebody else's settings and assume you'll get the exact same result, because your favorite TikTok creator may swear by their settings, and that's great for their setup. You need to learn yours. All right, so follow your vendor instructions. Now, we talked about the temperature, the time, and pressure. And now I'm going to repeat something you've heard me say throughout this series because it's that important. Follow the pressing instructions from the vendor who made your transfer. Different vendors may give you different instructions for their transfers, and that's normal. Vendor A may say press at 350, and vendor B may press at 310. So you have to follow the instructions that were given to you from the vendor and where you purchased your transfers. So you remember when we talked about storing your transfers in class 3? If you aren't using all of them right away, keep the pressing instructions with them, because 3 months from now, you're going to pull out that transfer and you're going to be sitting in front of your press with the blank and you're going to say, now, where did I get this from? How much time? What is the temperature? I don't know. So if your transfer arrives though and you can't find pressing instructions, don't guess. Check the vendor's website or contact the vendor and ask. All right, so we need to know your blank. The shirt matters too, or whatever the blank. It doesn't necessarily have to be a shirt, but we're going to talk about shirts. So you can't forget about the blank because that is an important part of the equation and it matters. So blank is simply an undecorated item that you're putting your design on. A t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, tote bag, or whatever you're customizing. Before you press your shirt, look at the tag or product information and know what you're working with, because different fabrics can respond differently to heat. So we don't want to treat every shirt exactly the same just because we're using a DTF transfer. Remember, you're not only applying heat to the transfer, you're also applying heat to the shirt. Now, we're going to look at the surface that you're pressing, because your heat press needs to make good, even contact with the area where your transfer is going. So if part of your design is sitting on over a raised area and another part isn't, you may not get the same pressure across the entire transfer. So you may ask, well, what do I do if there's a seam or if there's some zippers? That's one of the hands-on things we'll get into when we actually learn the pressing process. But for today, I want you to know how to look for those things. And please inspect your blank before you put a transfer on it. Make sure it's the correct size, correct colors, there's no stains or marks, there's no holes, no defects, or anything unusual with the garment. If I'm working on a customer's order, I'd much rather discover a problem with a $4 blank before I put my transfer and my labor onto it. Do you remember when we talked about buying blanks in class 3 and I told you not to chase the cheapest shirt? This is another reason why. You're creating a finished product that someone is going to wear, wash, and hopefully tell somebody else about.
So now that we've checked our transfers, we looked at the settings, we followed our vendor instructions, and we know what we're pressing. But how do you know when the press actually went right? So we're going to talk about that. First, your design should be completely attached to the garment. You shouldn't have sections that look like they're lifting or didn't stick. Those smaller areas can sometimes make a problem easier to spot. Don't just look in the center and say, "Ooh, that looks good." Take a few seconds and actually inspect the whole design. Excuse me. Your finished shirt should look like a finished product, not like you stuck something on a shirt and hoped for the best. A shirt can look beautiful sitting on your table and still have a problem you haven't discovered yet. So different transfers may feel different. So we're not looking for one particular texture, but as you work with your transfers, start paying attention to how the finished designs look and feel. Okay, so this is good adhesion versus lifting edges. So obviously, which one would you feel comfortable giving to your paying customer? A or B? Now, did I freeze up again? I hope not. Yes, A. Everything is adhered. This is lifting up. No bueno. No bueno. Now we're for myself this way, and I wouldn't sell them, but I've had this happen. I've had this issue. But before a shirt leaves your hands, you want to take a minute to look at it like your customer's going to look at it, because we all know that everything is not going to go right, but you have to take all of the steps to ensure everything can go as right as possible. So we're going to take and look at some of the most common pressing mistakes make and how to recognize them. Come on. All right. The first one is the wrong temperature. Too little or too much heat can affect the adhesion, the color, or the actual garment. So you want to make sure you use the right temperature. Don't guess. Don't go up 5 degrees, down 5 degrees. Use what the vendor instructions say. And the wrong pressure, too little, too much, or uneven pressure can affect the result. And the wrong amount of time. So you don't want to just be guessing and say, I'm going to add a couple more seconds. Only time that can really happen is if you notice that it's not adhering when you try to peel, then you may need a little more heat, a little more time. And that's when I use my actual hand press to do that and not press the whole garment. Because if the majority of the image is already adhered and you add extra pressure, now you're adding more, extra heat and time, you're adding more heat, pressure, and time to the other portion of the design that's already pressed. And the wrong peeling timing. So everyone is different. It might be a hot peel, a warm peel, or a cold peel. So you have to read your instructions. I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay, because sometimes we are so focused on the transfer that we forget about the shirt. If your vendor recommends a second press, don't treat it like it's an optional suggestion just because you're in a hurry. And here's something that I think beginners really need to hear. Sometimes you can follow the instructions and still end up with a problem. That doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. Your job isn't immediately to blame yourself or blame the vendor. Your job is to figure out what happened. So here we got another question. You pressure transfer and one corner starts lifting. What's the first thing that you should do? You should either A, immediately turn the temperature up, B, immediately blame the vendor, C, stop and check the instructions and your pressing conditions, or D, throw the shirt away and start over. All right, the creator card says repress. Anyone else have an answer? The actual answer is C. You're going to stop and check the instructions and check your, yes, Mel's Media. C. You're going to check, stop and check the instructions and your pressing conditions, because maybe you didn't do a pre-press and that part of the shirt, when you, or you did do a pre-press, but that part of the shirt didn't get enough heat to get out the moisture. So you don't want to guess. You want to troubleshoot first. When something goes wrong, randomly changing your temperature, time, and pressure all at once doesn't teach you anything. No problem. Good to see you, Giselle. Okay, now sometimes the problem starts before you even touch the heat press. So I'm going to show you a video. I told you about it. This transfer taught me an important lesson, and I'm going to show you what happened. And I sped up the video. So, okay. So, based on what you just saw, would you feel comfortable placing a large customer order with this vendor? And I did speed it up, so I don't know if you guys noticed what was going on. So right here, what you see me doing, parts of the letters were actually off of the transfer. So in the beginning, you saw me trying to put the letters on the transfer, then I folded it up, and then I put it down, and the letters still moved, and I had to pick all those little pieces off and put them back onto the shirt. So it wasn't a temperature problem. It wasn't a pressure problem. The transfer was the problem before I ever pressed it. And that's exactly why I've been telling you throughout this series to test the vendor before you commit to using them for a customer without testing that vendor first. Because a test transfer, it might cost you a couple of dollars, and those few dollars is much more valuable than finding out a vendor isn't reliable in the middle of a 25 shirt customer order that can cost you a whole lot more. So we just talked about the mistakes that we can make when pressing, but I also want you to understand that sometimes the problem starts before you even touch the heat press. And so you don't want to always think that you're the problem. Sometimes it is just the actual transfer. So I always suggest doing a test run with the vendor, get a test transfer and try them out and see. I mean, and sometimes some vendors you may have tried out, and the next time you get a transfer from them, it might not work out as well. It could just be a bad batch that particular time. But if you have never tried them, I would not say do a big large order without testing them first. So, but what happens if your transfer looks fine and something still goes wrong? That's when you need to know how to troubleshoot. So before you touch any settings, expect the shirt in the transfer. So you've seen my example where the problem wasn't my temperature or my pressure, and it was the transfer itself. But what if your transfer looks fine before you press it, you follow the instructions, and it still doesn't look right afterwards? This is where troubleshooting comes in. Don't panic and don't start changing everything, because we just want to start saying maybe a couple more seconds, let me press it a little longer, maybe my pressure was off. But you need to troubleshoot, go step by step and see, because if you change your temperature and the time and the pressure all at once, you don't know what caused the problem. So what you can see can give you clues about where you need to investigate. So, like I said, temperature is only one of the things you want to investigate, not the only thing. You can't say, I think it was about 10 seconds. Was it actually what the vendor recommended? Because if they recommended 15 and you did 10, you didn't get. So next, you want to think about your pressure. Sometimes the transfer isn't can give you clues. So you want to consider the transfer. Consider the garment itself. So you want to check your observe the problem. So this is the order of trouble. You want to observe the problem, check your vendor instructions, check the temperature, check the time, check the pressure, check your blank, and then check the transfer. You want to change one thing at a time. So here's another question for you. Let's see if you've been paying attention. Let's say you press a shirt and part of the design doesn't adhere properly. What is your first move? Turn the temperature up. A. B. Press it again for twice as long. C. Stop, inspect the problem, and check the vendor instructions. Or D. Call the vendor and tell them their transfers don't work. That is correct. C. C is the correct answer. You want to stop, inspect the problem, and check the vendor instructions. So, next we're going to talk about testing before you sell. Because even if your shirt looks perfect after pressing, there's still one more thing that I want you to do before you start selling it. You need to test it, because your paying customer should never be the person who discovers whether your product can survive the wash. Even when your shirt looks perfect, like I just did this shirt and it looks great, but I haven't washed it yet. So I haven't tested this DTF transfer. Now I've used this vendor, but I haven't tested this particular transfer myself, because your paying customer needs to know that, hey, when they wash it, it's going to hold up besides one wash. So your first inspection is it should look like it's a good press. But after that, you need to test it, you need to wash it, you need to wear it. So you need to look for problems before your customer has the opportunity to find them. But I know somebody's probably thinking, I don't want to waste a shirt and a transfer just testing it. And I get it, because our coins are very valuable. But I'd rather invest in one test shirt than replace a customer's order, refund their money, and damage my reputation, or all three, because I didn't do a test. And this is thinking like a business owner, not just a hobbyist. And your test shirt doesn't have to go in a drawer. When you're finished, you wear it. Let people see your work. Now you're testing your product and marketing your business at the same time. So let me ask you this. What would you rather lose? The cost of one shirt, one test shirt, or the trust of a paying customer? So my tip to everyone is test first, sell second. Your customer should not be your quality control department. They're not quality control. So you want them to be repeat customers. So you want to test first, sell second. All right. So now I want to look back and see how far we've come today, all the things that we've learned. So before you press, you're going to inspect your transfer and your blank. We understand understand temperature, time, and pressure, and how all three of them work together. We're going to follow our vendor instructions. We've learned about, you're going to know what you're pressing. You're going to inspect your finished product. If something goes wrong, you're going to troubleshoot instead of guessing. And before you sell it, test it. Now I want you to take what you learned today and actually use it. So here is your class 4 challenge. I want you to choose one transfer that you've tested or feel comfortable using when you purchased. Choose a blank, review the vendor pressing instructions, and press one test shirt or any blank, it could be a tote, that you have available. And I want you to inspect it, wear it, wash, test it before deciding if it's ready to sell. But Now, if you don't have a heat press yet, don't disappear on me. You're still building your foundation. You're still building. So just we want you to be able to build upon each class. So and now if you're thinking, I understand what you taught today, but I really want something I can keep beside me when I'm ready to press, because this is a lot of information. That's why I created my beginner DTF pressing guide as a resource that you can refer back to when you're working on your projects. Because I don't expect that you're going to remember everything from a live class. And I don't want you scrolling through a YouTube video every time you're standing in front of your heat press, because that's not going to work. And this pressing guide is designed to give you an easy reference as you're building confidence with your pressing process. And there's a link for the pressing guide in the description for this class. All right, so now if you've been following this series and you're thinking, I'm ready for more than information, I want somebody to actually walk me through building this step by step, just stay with me, because I'm working on something specifically for those of you who are ready to move from learning about DTF to actually building your DTF business. And that's where we're headed next. In class 5, we're going to move from practicing to preparing for your first sale. You've learned the basics in the first 4 classes. You've chosen your supplies, you've ordered transfers, and you understand what goes into a successful press. Now we're going to talk about what you do with all of that knowledge to start building momentum in your business. And that is going to be class 5, from practice to your first sale. What to do after you've learned the basics. So before we end, I want you to remember something. Your first press may not be perfect, because mine sure wasn't. It was crooked, it was off, it didn't adhere all the way. And your second press may not be perfect either. The link's not there? Okay, I'm going to drop it in the chat. Give me 1 second. As soon as, let me find it. All right, there we go. I dropped it in the chat for everybody. So just because your first presses are not perfect, I don't want you to give up, because it's all part of learning. You have to know that, okay, one bad press doesn't mean that you can't do this business. Just learn from it. Learn from every mistake that you make. You're going to troubleshoot and you're going to test again, because confidence doesn't come from watching someone else press shirts. It comes from gaining experience with your own equipment, your own transfers, and your own products. So I want you to keep taking one purposely crafted step at a time. Now, it is giveaway time. Now, were you paying attention? I hope so, because I told you at the beginning that you needed to stay until the end, because we're going to do a giveaway. So we're going to find out who had their paper, pen, pencil, crayon, and was actually paying attention. Are we ready? Put ready in the comments if you're ready. So we've got 2 giveaways tonight. So question number 1 is, I told you to check 5 things. Yes, the crayon. That's what I always tell you, pen, pencil, crayon. You know, whatever you got. I would have said, you know, eyebrow pencil. That could work too. So I told you to check 5 things in your vendor pressing instructions before you press. Name at least 4. All right. Name at least 4 things that you should check from your vendor pressing instructions before you press. Am I frozen or no? Sure, I can repeat the question. All right, I told you to check 5 things in your vendor's pressing instructions before you press. Name at least 4 of the 5. So, Mel Media, you got 3. And AJ Designs, Giselle, you have 3. You're missing 1 or 1 more. All right, Mel Media, that is correct. Time, temperature, pressure, peel type. So it was temperature, time, pressure, peel instructions, and whether a second press is recommended. Good job, Mel's Media. If you can drop your email in the chat, I will email you after class this evening. All right, we ready for question number 2? I know you guys got this. Your brains are sharp. You guys are sharp. If something goes wrong with your press, what is the one troubleshooting rule I told you to remember? If something goes wrong with your press, what is the one rule I told you to remember? And there was a hint in that question. No. So the hint was in, there's a hint word in the question. If something goes wrong with your press, what is the one troubleshooting rule I told you to remember? No, not use another press. Nope, not try another material. Toya, you have a guess? So the answer is change one thing at a time. Remember, I said you don't want to change your time, temperature, pressure all at once because then you don't know what was the actual issue. So does anyone have any questions? Because I want to thank you guys for spending your Sunday evening with me. You could have been anywhere else, but don't forget your class. Oh, Don't forget your class 4 challenge because we'll see you in class 5 from practice to your first sale. Oh, you thought you meant the actual heat press itself, not the actual pressing of it. All right, Mel Media, can you drop your email in the chat, please? I don't want to miss it before we end for the evening. So, like I said, I want to thank you guys for spending this time with me. Don't forget your Class 4 challenge, and I'll see you in Class 5 for the DTF Success Series from practice to your first sale. Until next time, keep building with purpose, one purposely crafted step at a time. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, guys. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's getting easier and easier. All right, ladies, have a great Sunday evening, what's left of it, and I will see you guys in the group.